Here we are, Jenn Silvernagle, another week and another great show planned. How are you today?
I'm good, Gary. How you doing?
I am doing awesome. We got some really cool stuff planned and some hot topics. And we're
hmm
very, very fortunate to have Ben Tsirlin, one of our own. He's also a realtor and home inspector. So we thought it'd be a great conversation to talk to Ben today as we kind of get back into doing more home inspections and just seeing what he's been up to as well. We should
Yeah,
we
I
should roll
love
the
it.
intro. Yeah, let's get the intro and then we'll get to Ben. All the good stuff.
Sounds good.
Beautiful. I still love that intro every time. Thanks to whoever made that,
I know.
Dylan Silvernagle.
Yeah, he does good work.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. So we're gonna here's our topics for the day. Let's drop them early so people know what they're tuning in for. We're gonna talk about
hmm
irrevocable, what it means. Can you retract an offer? We're going to talk about the insurance clause, the pre-printed insurance clause that is in the purchase and sale agreement. We're going to talk about that because I actually had firsthand experience as a buyer and a seller's agent on what's happening with that. So lots of good stuff there. And then Form 127. Jen, we're
hmm
going to talk about that and best case scenario, not best case scenario. What am I trying to say? Best use, best practice, right?
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah, that one's always an interesting one, right? The what's the best way to use it? So I think it's a good topic to cover for sure.
Good, good. Well, as promised, we have a guest on the show today, and we've known Ben for a couple of years now. And one of the cool things as we get to know Ben more and more is not only is he, an up and coming agent and doing some pretty amazing things, but he has a really cool background in home inspections and taking care of his buyer clients, seller clients. And I thought it'd be good to have Ben on the call today to talk to him about not only why home inspections are important, but how it protects us as agents. Speaking of Form
Mm.
127, Jen, and that's a nice segue, and also
Yeah.
obviously protecting the clients that we work for. So without further ado, let's bring Ben Tsirlin on the call, and a big hello to you, Ben, and thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me. This is super awesome. I'm a big fan of the show and of course of you guys. So this is going to be a lot of fun for me today.
Very good.
That's
Very
awesome.
good. So Ben, you've been with KW not for a terribly long time, but it's going on about 2 years now, right? Maybe a little bit more than that.
Rounding 2 years, yeah, I believe in February, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
would be 2 years.
fantastic.
Yeah,
hmm
been
Yeah, I
a
think
wild
that's
ride.
right.
You guys are great here. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good. Very good. And talk to us a little bit about who Ben Tsirlin is. For those that don't know, who's Ben? And the most important question, Jen, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Let's hear it.
Tsirlin.
Serlin, that's exactly right.
Nailed it.
Exactly.
Okay. Show's
Better,
done.
better
We're
than,
done.
better than a lot of people. For sure.
We're not
So,
going to top that, Gary. Let's just go home.
Yeah.
so Ben Tsirlin is, if you want the background, right? So previous to me being a realtor, I've been inspecting now, oh gosh, it's been since 2014, I believe, when I got my certification. And previous to that, I was in renovation, interior renovation. So a nice little background there. And that's it. Just kind of every day doing all these things, right? Having fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Good. And what was the thought process or the idea? Perhaps you saw a business opportunity to start doing home inspections to help people. What was behind that motivation?
For sure. So the deal was like with construction with renovation, right? It was a good ride. I learned a lot, but it sort of came to the point where it was long, very long days, right? Like early days, long days, back-breaking labor, that type of stuff, right? So I sort of came to a point in my life where I said, "What's next?" Right? Which way do you go? Right? Kind of like a fork in the road. And I've always been interested in real estate in the industry. Um, for one reason or the other, I decided to be an inspector, right? Because the way that I did the math was, okay, here's how many realtors there are in Ontario. Here's how many home inspectors there are, right? Like, cha-ching, right? And so then I had gone back to school and got my certification, and yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Jen, throw in a couple of questions but to Ben before we start asking him some quirky home inspection questions.
Yeah, for sure. So, I guess one of the main questions that just to get the general information out of the way, I know that quite a few of our agents at the brokerage use you as a realtor, as a home inspector as well. So, what areas do you cover? Like, how does that business work compared to a real estate business?
For sure. So predominantly I cover Toronto and GTA.
Mhm.
If someone really wants me to go out further than that, then I do, right? I just charge accordingly for the distance.
Mhm.
That's generally how it would go, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's yeah, pretty straightforward in that sense, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you're working with buyers, usually doing home inspections, unless it's a pre-home inspection that you're doing for a seller, what are those conversations look like? Like, how do you prepare a buyer for all of the minor stuff that's going to come up in a home inspection versus, the big issues that are going to come up? How do you set that expectation, or do
Sure.
you leave that up to us as the realtors to have that conversation?
It's really interesting because it's a crapshoot when it comes to this kind of stuff because I think it depends on the kind of client you're dealing with, right? Like
Yeah.
you have the entire spectrum, right? There's the people who I've had every type of client that you can imagine, right? There's people who just say, okay, go do it and don't even show up and just send me the report. And there's people who come and like literally are breathing down my neck the entire inspection and are asking me a million questions about what's this, what's that, right? And right. And it
Yeah.
also depends on, so I typically, the way that I conduct my business is I try not to be an alarmist, right? Everyone does it different because in the home inspection industry, there's no one way to do something, right? And because
Hmm.
it's largely unregulated in Ontario, we have a standards of practice that we should be following, right? But
Right.
because the Ontario government doesn't oversee home inspectors, so it's kind
Hmm.
of like the Wild West in that sense, right? Where I can
Right.
have one opinion and then another inspector can have a different opinion, right? So it really depends, right? I try to educate my clients. Like if people come, the buyers show up. As if they walk with me, I always encourage people to come on the inspection with me, so I can
Yeah.
hopefully alleviate some of the questions that they would ask the realtors where they might otherwise not know, right? So it's always different in that sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And as a home inspector, I mean, you and I have had this conversation before. You've done a few inspections for me, and we've talked about, the basic wear and tear of a property versus, the big issues, the electrical, the mechanical, the structural, the big, negotiating points, right? So not being an alarmist, but still having to highlight, everything that shows up. Like, how do you decide? Like, I've always wondered this. This might be a really weird question, but how do you decide as an inspector, like what goes in your report and what is just standard home condition or standard wear and tear that doesn't need to get notified, right? So, because I know over the years I've had some at home inspectors who flag every single thing, and like it's crazy, right? They're just like these little tiny things, and if you've got a buyer that's a little nervous, that really scares them getting a report with full of issues. And yet, you're still kind of obligated to disclose. So how do you balance that?
For sure. And that's a really great question. And so it's interesting because in my personal practice, like over the years, I've sort of refined the report itself. And that's why I generally recommend for the client to actually show up to the inspection so I can
Mhm.
go through with them. Like, let's say if things are not going to be in the report, things like to me, what's minor is let's say, a doorstop not being on the door. Like, that's hopefully something that won't be a deal breaker for people. You know what I mean?
You
So,
never know, Ben. You never know.
exactly right. And so what happens is, like, for things like that, if I was to put them on the report, I would just place them under minor importance, right? Like, the way that I do it is mentally I split in my head things that would be a deal breaker. Let's say things that are foundational or structural nature, right? And they would
Mhm.
go in the top of the list, right? And that if the client shows up, it allows me to communicate to them the degree of
Right.
importance of things, right? Right. And
Yeah.
hopefully that
Yeah.
even the most nervous buyers, this would hopefully calm them down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and alternatively, like, I'm always available after the report is done and I ship it off. People can call me anytime, right? If they have any questions, they're always aware that, I'm a phone call away. And if they're freaking out about something, they can just call me. We can have that conversation, right?
And,
Yeah.
and I liked the line of your questioning, Jen. What, as a buyer, when buyers come in and use your services,
Right.
the question that I have is, what do you wish all buyers knew before they started a home
That's a good
inspection?
question.
Like, what do you wish that they came already knowing?
This is for me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh gosh. That's a good question for sure. I wish that they knew that I can't see through walls. I don't have X-ray vision.
Good answer. Yeah. No X-ray vision.
Well, it's
Ben,
interesting.
your stock's
because
going down, my man. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but it's actually quite interesting because
Yeah.
with all of my my tools and the technology and this and that, there will if something is undiscoverable, like there's not enough signs to be able to tell, right? Because a home inspection is an investigation, right? And
Mhm.
I'm even with all the tools at my disposal, technically speaking, it's an observational inspection, right? Like, I'm not opening up walls and this and that, right? It's funny because when I had first started around 2014, it was still the time where that show with Mike Holmes, was
Oh
on.
yeah,
They
homes on
called it.
homes. Yeah.
Well, no, well, that particular one was called Holmes Inspection, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Gotcha.
premise there was that they would go in, and there would be something wrong with the house, and they would start tearing stuff open. And that's where there was a lot of confusion in that time period, because as I would do inspections then, people would get surprised. And I've had people reference that show to me, and I'm like, well, first of all, it's a TV show, and so, right, and so something along these lines. But I
Yeah.
think nowadays people have become more informed, right? And so
Yeah.
I typically don't have issues with that kind of stuff, right? Especially people that are first-time buyers typically do show up to the inspection because they're excited and they're nervous and all that type of stuff, right? And so it allows me. I feel like I've refined the way that I explain things, right? So
Mhm.
to give people the idea of to set the precedent for the inspection. Let's put it that way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
No, that's
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I totally get
So
it. Not being able to
so
see through walls is a big deal.
exactly. So if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
And
funny. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
no, I was just gonna say you use like the thermal gun and all that stuff. Like you use a drone to check the roof. Like you're at a high level on the technology scale of how you make things accessible that sometimes wouldn't be accessible otherwise, right? So even with all of that, it is funny that buyers still expect you to know what's behind the drywall, right?
For sure.
It always makes me
And
laugh. Yeah. Sorry, that was it,
that
Gary.
drone, that drone is a godsend, because when I first started, like, for the first little while, I would, like, haul on the roofs, and, like, I'm not generally a fan of heights, but if you got to go up there, you got to go up there, right? Because it's part of the job.
Yeah.
But then when I discovered drones, I was like, that's it, keep me grounded.
Yeah.
And the good thing about the drones too, actually, is that because roofs have different pitches, and if a roof has too high of a pitch and I couldn't even go up there on a ladder, the drone allows me to have it 360 view of that roof. So it's an added benefit, on top of
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what when you're using a drone, is it again, it's just what the camera picks up, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for any visual defects or possibilities of what could go wrong in the future. How in depth are you looking when you're using a drone?
So super in depth. So my
Really?
drone has a 4K camera, yeah, for sure. Like it has to be nice and clear picture, right? So it's because it's my eyes up there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm looking for, well, of course, the usual stuff. Anything that's anyone with a naked eye could see, right? Torn off shingles, things of that nature. But depending on the roofing material itself, like most commonly, obviously, we have asphalt shingles.
Yeah.
I'm looking for things like wear and tear, granular loss, right? Things that would start to show the age of the roof to sort of prepare people. If the roof doesn't need replacement right now, if in the next couple of years it's starting to get up there, then that's a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. For sure.
I'm going to put you on the spot. And if you want to deflect to Jen, whatever. I'm kidding.
Oh boy.
for pretty much probably everyone watching, they're either a real estate agent, aspiring to be an agent, or perhaps, maybe they're a buyer themselves. Are there any quick things that as you walk up to a property that you're already scanning for that you wouldn't mind sharing with us? Like whether it's the grade of the property or the roof, for instance, like what's that quick first scan of a property that you first get?
Sure.
That you're doing? Yeah.
I always, every time, right? Like when I get out of the car, I'm in inspection mode right away. Or the first thing, it's funny that I usually do is because I pull up right on the driveway, as I get out, a common problem with driveways is that they start to sink, like the asphalt starts to sink from the garage slab, and so I look at those because those can be trip hazards, right? So I start there, and then after I zoom out, typically my process before I send the drone up, because the roof is the first thing I generally inspect. Before I send the drone up, I'll go with my binoculars. I'll go like up the street farther up, and I'll just check with my binoculars first, right? Because they're two different kind of views you get, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I move back, right, when I just kind of zoom out of the house, I'm looking at the lines, making sure that things are straight and plumb as far as I can tell, right? I get a small.
That's a good point there. Sorry, Ben. Like people often don't relate or maybe underestimate even where the house is located on the street, whether it's down the hill, up the hill. Like talk to us a little bit about what that can do to a property if it's down the hill a little bit from a water perspective.
For sure. So grading can be an important aspect, right? Because it will also set the precedent. So if a house is sitting on a slope, I go, okay, these are the things that I need to look out for now, right? Because the foundation, if the slope of the grading of the house is on a downhill, let's say, the foundation will have something called like step foundation, right? So they'll kind of look like steps. So they're more prevalent to sort of cracking the ground, from the rain, right? The rain can sometimes wash the grading away.
Right.
And then things can start to move. So there's a lot more things you have to sort of pay attention to, right? So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as realtors, we're excited. It's a beautiful home, but where it's located on the street, the subdivision can have a huge factor into the foundation issues and everything else, right?
Absolutely.
For sure. And so now being on this part of the transaction, right? Because before I became an agent, I had just submitted the report and that was it. I didn't hear anything else, right? And so now being on this part of the conversation as well, it becomes really interesting, right?
Yeah. So during the many inspections that you've done, you ever like pop the door open to something that kind of surprised you, or pop the attic on something you're like, I did not see that coming? Like whether it's structurally or just weird stuff in the homes. Those are the stories that I'm sure kind of stick out. Yeah.
I absolutely do. And a few things actually come to mind. So I had one time, opened an attic hatch, and I found there was like a bunch of very strange looking dolls.
Okay.
Some of them were mannequins. Some of them looked like they came right out of the movie. What was that? The It movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, then I've found like medieval tools and like super old newspapers. I actually walked into I was inspecting this one house. It was in Toronto, I believe, and I walked into the bedroom, and these people had like a wall of exotic animals. So there was all kinds of snakes and tarantulas and like yeah. So
Like
that
live
you
ones?
of course yeah, they were in
I'm picturing like really ugly wallpaper.
Oh my God. That would have been, yeah, that would have been funny. No, but it was like that. And so you could be rest assured that room
Oh
was very
man.
quickly inspected. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Nice,
yeah.
nice.
Oh,
No,
that
no
would
weird,
terrify me.
crazy
I,
dog attacks or cat attacks or anything like that.
no, you know what? It's interesting because I'm very good with animals. I love animals. And so it has for sure happened where I've gone on inspection that the dogs would be roaming around the house, but we sort of kind of made good connections and
Yeah.
they left me alone and let me, you know. I've
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
I've had kids, so there would sometimes be the families at home. I've had the kids follow me around, like glued to me during the entire inspection. I've had the dogs also follow me around. It's been quite funny. Actually, I've had it happen a few times where I've done an inspection and the family was home and they had invited me like to sit down for lunch, you know,
Oh,
with them.
yeah. They're hoping that your inspection goes well, so the home sells.
It
Yeah.
was some good
That's
times.
that's funny. I think you lost Mary on the snakes. If there's snakes in the house, snakes in a plane,
Yeah.
snakes in the house, she's
Yeah,
gone.
that was pretty
Yeah.
wild.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Funny, funny. I think perhaps the question that we should have asked earlier perhaps is, for some of us that, maybe you're a newer agent and you haven't gone through this whole inspection process because of the way the market's been over the last number of months. And now as you kind
Sure.
of ease back into it, the length of an inspection, obviously it's relatable to the size of the home, but even your typical, 3-bedroom townhouse home is still what, a few hours, right, Ben? A couple
Totally,
hours?
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say a couple hours
Yeah.
for sure. Like if
Mhm.
you're nice and thorough, you know what I mean? Yeah.
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 And the length can certainly depend on if, if the clients are there with you, if they're asking 5 questions or 100, and this type
Yeah.
of stuff, right? And so, and if the house is older, like the age of the home certainly has to do with the length as well, because in older homes, there's more to see, there's different materials, there's more potential areas for issues, right? So like, let's say
Mhm.
if I'm doing an inspection and I find something that I'm like, okay, maybe there's something here, so I need to go either outside or somewhere else to figure it out and to put the pieces together. It's like a puzzle, basically, right?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
in wrapping up here, just a moment here, Ben, too,
sure.
as the market kind of shifts a little bit, where we do have that opportunity, perhaps, to get back to putting home inspections in our purchase and sale agreements, from the buyer's perspective. Over the last number of months, have you been doing more pre-inspections, whether it's prior to us submitting an offer or maybe a house that's being listed and the seller wants to provide a pre-inspection report?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So in this seller's market, it's mostly been pre-listing inspections, right? So
Mm.
it's a great tool. It's hard to gauge how much a pre-listing inspection does help, because in a very hot seller's market, we saw that not nobody, but a lot of people, just overlooked the inspection as a
Yeah.
whole, right? One like, good practice that I recommend to people typically is to buyers is to do so. This is something that I do, for people who want it, is to, if they're really interested in the house, to call me and I'll come with them, let's say for that hour showing, and I check the major systems and components, right? So we were talking about major
Mhm.
versus minor issues, right? Because minor issues,
Yep.
it's whatever, right? So
Yeah.
that was good practice during the seller's market. And now that we're, in some areas seeing the shift starting to happen, um,
Yeah.
it's starting to, people are starting to be able to do the inspections in the clause in the conditions, right? So yeah, which is great. And it's actually even more interesting that during a balanced market, I find that while some people actually still do pre-listing inspections in a balanced market, for whatever reason, a lot of buyers don't trust that and still want to get their own inspection done. Whereas in the seller's market, or in the seller's market, they just take the word of the report, of the pre-list report, right? Which is quite funny. So
Yeah. Well, they don't have a choice.
there you go.
Yeah.
Very
Better than
good.
nothing, right?
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff. And this is the best way for people to get a hold of you, Ben, is, there's your Instagram handle, but if people wanted your services as a home inspector, is that one way to get a hold of you, or what's the best way?
For sure. They can go on there. Yeah, my phone number's on there. It's also 416-893-7466. They can just call me, shoot me a text. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. So far, I've been told to get on TikTok, so maybe I'll do that as well.
Very
So,
good. That's
And start
right.
a podcast.
there you go.
Yeah. Ben,
Yeah.
this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, your expertise this afternoon, and being Ben. I mean, they're one. I hate to say it. I'm not going to say this out loud. You're one of our faves. But it's, the real estate industry, whether you're an inspector, realtor, what have you, it's all about experiences. And I know, Ben, just by watching your social media, you're providing amazing experiences for your clients, whether it's, however you're serving them. So keep that up, and have an amazing rest of the year, my friend. Thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was a blast.
Very good. Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
Take care.
Ben Tsirlin, everybody. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, he's, we always talk about how we service our clients, and whether it's with knowledge or being around and putting the right people in touch with them. Ben's one of those good guys for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's done inspections for quite a few people at the brokerage and in the coaching program, and even myself and that. And he just does such a good job, right? He's so thorough. He takes his time. He actually looks at everything and, processes, and like he said, investigates it. And you can tell that, right? Because he's not just brushing over things. There's discussions along the way about what things mean and how they could impact the buyer or the seller. And there's huge value in that, right? Not everybody provides that experience. So.
Yeah. And he's absolutely right. From the pre-inspection, or a home inspection before you submit an offer. I'm sure you've done it too, Jen, as a buyer's agent. We've done it a handful of times. There's different ways to get that home inspection done, so you feel at ease, right? Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And what he mentioned there, just having the inspector go in for your appointment and looking at the major elements, right? The structure, mechanical, electrical, like we talked about, that should be enough peace of mind to know that there's no big costs that we can indicate right off the bat, right? Furnace is good, AC is good, all that sort of stuff, to at least make your buyers feel a bit more comfortable. So I think that was a smart, for the home inspectors that did that, I think it was a smart way to pivot their business during that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Faye has an interesting question here, and I think what Faye's meaning. Sorry, let me read it. Do you ever check with the town to see if there have been any files? And what I believe Faye's asking, if any work, what's the word I'm looking for? Work judgments or anything like that against the permits, against the home, because we've run into that sometimes, and usually through the initial walkthrough, or even with a home inspection, you can see if an addition was built or altered, the home has been altered. And it's always worth the question from the realtor. I'd say, was a home or a permit pulled for tearing out this load-bearing wall, for instance, right?
Yeah. And I think a way to approach that too, I think I don't want to answer for Ben, but from that home inspector's perspective would be that they would maybe indicate that, hey, this is an addition, or this doesn't look original to the rest of the home, which would then allow us as the realtors to ask those bigger questions, or go do due diligence at the town, or whatever we need to do for our clients at that point, right?
Yeah, for sure. I have a question for you. Have you ever done a home inspection and walked away from the sale?
Yes, more than once. Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah. I always it's always a tough one, right? Because you want to try and find a middle ground. And I don't think I've ever kind of had one where I've just fully been like, we're out, right off the bat, right? I don't think I've ever had that. Maybe it's hard to remember all of them. I've definitely gone back and kind of tried to negotiate as best I could.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
for
then if
sure.
it hasn't worked out, been like, okay, well, we can't come to a common ground. And a question for you, have you ever had a deal fall apart from a home inspection where what was flagged was a relatively minor issue, but you couldn't kind of keep it together even with that minor concern?
Yeah, I guess it all depends what's minor. For instance, we had
Yeah.
one where it was one of these strange, it wasn't strange. It was a normal, I think it was a detached home, but a 3-story home. And we couldn't see the roof from the street nor anywhere. And we put our offer in, got accepted. Buyers loved it. Home inspection came and the roof had to be done like today.
Oh no, that's the worst.
So, and a roof on the home that size was probably about 10,000, give or take, whatever. And neither side was willing to budge. Neither side was willing to budge on it.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah,
we didn't
that's
go
pretty.
through with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't either. That's a big cost, right?
Yeah, and especially when the home was. I mean, this was probably 7-ish years ago. I mean, it's all relative to the home price, and the home price would have been, $500,000. So it was, it was a lot more for them to come up to the table with. I've been, the shortest home inspection that I've ever done was on a triplex for me personally to purchase, and it lasted maybe 15 minutes.
Did you buy it?
Nope. We walked right out of there and we went for chicken wings.
Yeah, we're done here. This is over.
It was, the foundation was falling apart. The floor joists on the first floor were all rotted. And the home inspector's like, you're opening a can of worms here. And we walked.
Yeah, it's just not worth it. Yeah. I've had stuff like that come up with clients, never for myself personally, but with clients, investors, where you come up with some interesting properties, right? Especially when you're working with someone who likes to do flips, because they obviously are looking for those diamonds in the rough or those properties that need a little extra love. And they often come with those bigger surprises, right? Because they just haven't been maintained, or we're lucky when you find it before you close. It's oftentimes when you start gutting it that you find it. But as you know,
speaking of finding it, Mary has an interesting story here. So Mary writes, my last house had a giant hole in the roof over the porch that was covered by a tree. We didn't know until we removed the tree 2 years later. Home inspector never saw it. That's crazy.
My God. That is crazy.
That's nuts. That's
wow.
Nuts. Yeah.
Well, I guess the tree was doing a good job.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. Trees.
Oh my gosh.
We've had, people love trees, and maybe one of the things we should have asked Ben is they can just wreak havoc on homes, especially if the tree grows over the roof and the shingles, and it'll turn your shingles, your 25-year shingles into 5-year shingles pretty quickly. Anyways, interesting story there, Mary.
Absolutely.
That's a good one. Mary's always good for a couple of stories like that.
I know.
Very good.
I can't believe the home that was missed in a home inspection. That's wild.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Very good. Okay. Speaking of Mary, so we talked about this last week, Jen, and Mary's leading us in the walk from Aurora all the way up to Tobermory, which is 307 kilometers. It's the Get Wellness program, or summer wellness program, I should say. And if you started last week, you only had to walk just shy of 4 kilometers a day to make that happen. But it's kind of a fun little, we'll call it contest, because I'm sure some people are going to turn it into a contest, the Colin Campbells of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But,
Colin and Vincent are competing somewhere.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. You can hit that URL. It is a lot of fun. You can track each other and just submit your I was going to call it mileage, but I guess that's what it is, every day or once a week. And I like doing it once a week because everyone thinks I'm doing useless or I'm not doing it. Then all of a sudden my numbers go up a lot every week. So you're on to me now, Mary.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Okay, so Jen, Form 127. Let's roll into that conversation.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, first of all, what is it? Form
Yeah,
127.
Form 127 is the form that we use to have our clients acknowledge that they have chosen not to put particular conditions into an offer. So when we're in multiples and we're working with a buyer and they don't want to, obviously we don't want to do a home inspection. Sorry, Ben, and we don't want to necessarily have a financing condition, or we're not able to, whatever that looks like in this scenario. There's a form that was created. That it's an acknowledgement of removal of conditions. And the buyer will actually initial and sign it, stating that they are aware that they're choosing not to put those conditions in the offer. Right. And so that's essentially what it is and the purpose of it. And the question around it, and, Gary, I'd love to hear your response to this, is there's always the two methods when it comes to removing conditions from an offer. There's the original method where we exit out and we have our client's initial beside it. And then there's the newer paperwork method where we have Form 127 completed by our clients in advance, and we don't put the terms into the offer whatsoever. So, the question that comes up often in coaching and in conversations with agents is, which one is the better approach, and which one should we do and why, right?
Yeah, thanks for giving me another loaded question.
You're welcome.
Yeah. First of all, we're here to protect our clients, right? Mm-hmm. And having the thorough conversation around what, in this case, we're talking about home inspection, what it means that they don't do one. And for our perspective, to get that in writing, I think is, I'll use a fancy word, paramount, right? It's important to, hey, you like that? I know.
Yeah.
That's my word of the week. It's important that they understand what that means, and using Form 127 is gonna provide that. Now, here's the interesting piece. That doesn't cover you for every offer you submit. It's very specific to the offer that you're submitting, right? Or the address that you're submitting. It's interesting because one might argue that it's already in the purchase and sale agreement. I think it's, I don't think, in fact, I know, because I had it up here earlier. In fact, clause 13 of the pre-printed clauses on the Ontario Real Estate Association form, it's actually in there to say that the buyer acknowledges that they have an opportunity to do a home inspection and they're choosing not to. And Marvin Alexander, the owner of our brokerage, in fact, lobbied really hard for that a number of years ago, so that would be entered. And I think the only way to take it a step further, which would be even better, if there were initial marks beside it for the buyer, right?
To say that they've acknowledged it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can go ahead and do that today, but I think, excuse me, I think the next best case scenario for you is using Form 127. And it can be used not only for inspections, it can be used for any type of clause or condition, like a financing or inspection condition, and things like that.
Insurance, anything like that. Insurance. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I always found interesting was the way that I was introduced to this form. And this is something that I'm going to fully disclose right now. We need to qualify this with, Christine or Andrew, our broker of records. But when the form was first introduced, the way that I was taught about it was that there had been some RICO cases where the agent had written the clause in and had their client exit out and initial beside it. And when it went in front of the tribunal, the client basically said, I didn't understand what I was removing. And so the agent then proceeded to lose that argument, essentially. And so Form 127 was a way to say, I have read it, it has been explained to me, and I am agreeing to remove it. So it has that extra level of protection when it comes to issues with RICO or anything like that. Now, again, that's how it was explained to me. And, I think we should verify it, or, have maybe check in with Andrew or Christine or whoever to confirm that. That's how I was taught why that one form is a better form of protection versus just removing it. You bring up a great point with clause 13, though, that it's kind of already stated there. So if that's right or not. Now, now I'm starting to question that. But
Well,
yeah, that's how it was introduced to me.
I think that's a fair comment. Albeit though, it's kind of an easy out for any buyer or seller to say, well,
Hmm.
it was here, but I didn't understand it. However,
Yeah.
from our perspective, maybe that's a good moment, about, as you're explaining things, do they understand? Ask our clients if they understand, and having them sign off and stuff is incredibly important, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of pre-printed clauses in our offers, and we just kind of here's Schedule A. This is what I put in. Sign here and here and here.
Hmm.
That's kind of where I see a lot of agents default to. But there's not one more clause that's more important than the other. However, if you're not doing an inspection, clause 13 should be highlighted, bolded, fireworks,
Yeah.
everything.
Initialed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
for
It's
sure.
such an interesting one, right? Because we want to make sure we're protected, yet we don't want to scare the clients. And, there's that balance of how to have those conversations effectively without making them feel that there's something serious that they're not necessarily doing, and yet it is something serious. So it's such a funny position as an agent in these multiple markets to try and navigate that conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure,
Mhm.
for sure. Let's go to the insurance clause. Let's talk about that one next. And I say this one next because it literally is next in the purchase and sale agreement by fluke. Number 14. So here's what happened. Here's the scenario that I'm going to provide, and the incredible learning that I got from it about 6 or 7 years ago. There is an insurance clause in our purchase and sale agreement. And in fact, I remember having a conversation, I think, with your Dylan about this maybe a month or two ago, and we talked pretty in depth about it,
Yeah,
right?
that'd be about right.
Yeah,
It's the right
yeah.
timeline. Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
And basically, to sum it all up, there's an insurance clause to say that the seller will hold insurance on the property if it already exists. So it's not telling them that they have to, but I mean, if you own a property, you're going to. And the way it's kind of written like that is, you might have vacant land. Well, there wouldn't be anything to insure on that, for instance. But that's the way it's kind of written.
Mhm.
And here's where it gets interesting. So 99% of the time, there's going to be insurance on that property. And what happens if there is substantial damage to the property while under contract to you as the buyer? Meaning, you've firmed up on a
Yeah.
property, you're waiting to close, and it closes in a month or two or whenever, tomorrow, doesn't matter. What happens to you as the buyer and to the contract? So
Yeah.
as I
So,
mentioned, go ahead, Jen.
yeah, I was just going to say, we talked about this earlier, and my answer previous to Gary's informative education that I got was that the seller would be responsible for fixing any damages, providing the home in the same condition it was purchased. And that would be it, that it would just, that the deal still a deal. It's just that the seller would have to fix it, right? That was what I thought would be the right answer.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and it is the right answer with some caveats to it, right?
Yep.
And the wording in there is in the event of substantial damage. Now, what's substantial? To me, a door handle has broken off and I don't know how to fix that, to there's a whole flood in the basement. What's the difference, right? And maybe a fair comment to that is, if it can go through insurance, or if you're going to go through your insurance and provide a claim, that would be substantial damage. So here's the interesting thing: as a buyer, you are in full control, 100% control. The seller is not, in this case. So I'll
Yeah.
use my scenario. And I thought I'd shared this story with Jen, but I was fortunate enough to be on another podcast last week, and I shared it there. So I was doing I was the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. So just throw another curveball into this story. I show up for the home inspection. We had it sold to my buyer. We showed up for the home inspection to the classic 1950s semi bungalow with a basement suite, right? One of my favorite type of properties to purchase as an investor. And I'm opening the door. It's probably end of February, and it had been minus 20 for like 18 weeks in a row. One of those.
Oh man.
Right.
Yeah.
And I open up the door, and I hear what I think is the shower running. And I think to myself, this isn't good, because this is a vacant property. There's nothing in it, no furniture, nothing. And then, you know, when you have that moment of, uh-oh, I know what's going on. And I run downstairs, and sure enough, I think it was right over the kitchen, the basement kitchen. It was a shower, to say the least. And water was pouring out of the pipes. So you quickly figured out how to turn the main water off and make a few phone calls, and the pipes had froze and had probably been flooding for at least a few days. So there wasn't inches of water. It had all been soaking up, but there were certainly lots of puddles, and it was nasty. It was terrible. Make a long story short, here's what happens in a situation like that. If we had been firm on that property, the buyer would have been in full control. And I'll explain it to you like this. When there's a flood like that, the buyer has the absolute right to walk away from the transaction and get their full deposit back with no deductions. Or they can take the insurance claim themselves. It can be directed to them so they can fix it, the buyer, upon closing. And it actually says that in clause 14. Now, here's where it gets a little murky, I'll say, is if the buyer's lender finds out there is an insurance claim on it, and especially during a flood, for instance, they may not want to lend on a property that's had that type of damage. So you can kind of see how all of a sudden it gets a little murky or confusing. So what we did in this case, we actually pushed the closing date out and had the homeowner, the current homeowner, the seller, repair it back to where it was. And of course, we ended up with, new kitchen cabinets and things like that. So that's exactly what we did. But it is interesting. I know, in fact, we've heard other stories of, basically the day before closing, there's a leak through the ceiling of, somebody that we know really well, Jen, and it basically destroyed the entire kitchen because it had rained incredibly heavily that day and destroyed, an entire kitchen. However, they still went through with the closing, and they were able to use the previous owner's insurance money to go fix all that stuff, which is really cool.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
that is cool. So those were the two things that I didn't know, that the buyer could choose to just walk away. Which is kind of crazy, right? To think that, and it makes sense, but also a little scary, I guess, or concerning. And then, my brain automatically goes to the lending part. It's like, okay, so I could get the insurance money, which is a good option, because now I can do how I want to do it. If I'm going to renovate, I can pick what I like. So that's awesome as a buyer. But if the lenders find out, then I might not get lending on the property. And so then, if you want to know whether you will or not, you'd still have to ask your lender. So how do you, do you just roll the dice? Like, it's a weird catch-22, right?
It's definitely a mortgage broker question. And it all depends on when it happens too, right? And there might be different stipulations you get written into the mortgage charge, for instance. And like, for instance, you're just buying a property that has knob and tube wiring in it or aluminum wiring in it, right? And they give you X amount of days after closing, X amount of days to remediate that. So there might be some things around that could be negotiated with the mortgage broker and the lender, for instance. But all
and
things,
in the insurance company too.
Exactly. And these are all things, it's all right there in the pre-printed clauses. And I'm sure we could go through each and every one of them and have a kind of a unique story around it, but it's good to review them from time to time. So when you are asked by a buyer or seller, what does that mean? You don't have to sit there trying to, circle the wagons and try and figure out what it does mean.
Yeah.
Remember
what was that story Gary told one time?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Really
and good to know, right? It's really good to know, because sometimes you do get those buyers that are more nervous or more, I don't want to say high C, but more detail oriented. Let's phrase it that way. And they do ask a lot of those questions. And for a vacant property, especially over the winter months with our weather, frozen pipes can burst. That is a thing if the home isn't being monitored and maintained properly. So when those questions come up, now you can answer it professionally and with proper guidance, right? So
Yeah.
I think it is important to know what those clauses state. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's another, here's some good advice, especially during the winter months. And if you have a vacant property in the winter months, we've had to do this from time to time with a number of units that we own, is if it's vacant, we keep a logbook in the property to say that we were there. Because if it's vacant for a lot, here's the thing. If you have an investment property and your insurance provider, most riders at this moment, or policies, I should say, it can be vacant up to typically up to 30 days. Not all the time, but typically up to 30 days, and it does nothing to your insurance. But there's a lot of insurance policies out there. Once it's day 31, it negates your insurance if it's vacant. So that's why you have to have a very regiment habit of going and checking in on the property, or at the very least, let your insurance broker know or policyholder know that it's vacant and you're going to be checking up on it. That's an entirely different conversation that we can have one day, but there's a lot of insurance. A lot of investors will go out and ask their typical home insurance provider to add insurance on their new second investment or their first investment, and it's not their appropriate appropriate insurance. Jen, we are going to have a conversation around that for sure. That's a topic that I've studied over and over again, as you can probably imagine from our investment days. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure you've been just learned by doing, right? The amount of properties you guys have had. I'm sure you've, just like real estate or anything else, the more you're in it, the more you learn, right? You just get exposed to so much stuff. So yeah.
Very good. Okay, last one. We'll just jump right to it. Irrevocable time, and what does irrevocable mean? So you had a really interesting question earlier this week that you rang me up with, and I'm like, yeah, that is a good question about the irrevocable time and an offer sign back and so forth. So let me preface it by this. Here's my, me in English, it typically doesn't go together. But here's what irrevocable means. If we start there, let's start the conversation there, Jen. Irrevocable simply means not able to change.
Yeah. Non-revocable.
Exactly. It's final.
Yes.
It's final. So talk to me about the scenario you had earlier this week. And it was a good question, really good question, because the agent was trying to be creative, and we give all kudos to the agent for thinking outside the box and being creative, right?
Yeah. And it was creative enough that, I called you. I was like, I think I know the answer to this, but can you just confirm that I'm approaching this the right way? So the question was that, it was a listing, and an offer had come in on the listing with an irrevocable time of, I believe it was 9 p.m. I'm pretty certain. And the seller's agent was trying to figure out, if we counter this offer and we give them, an irrevocable till 11, and they say we're not going to accept it, or they reject it, can we still accept the original offer with the irrevocable of 9 o'clock?
Yeah, I think the times were reversed on that, in fact.
Were they reversed? Okay, that would make more sense.
The buyer submitted an offer with 11 o'clock irrevocable, but you wanted, not you, but the agent thought, what if we do an offer with the earlier irrevocable time?
At 9 o'clock, and then that's right. And then if they don't accept it or they don't counter it, then we can still accept the 11 o'clock irrevocable, because we'll have that 2-hour window to make that choice. So the question was, can I do that? Right? Can I send it back and then still have that other live offer, basically?
Yeah. So if you're watching and you're thinking about, how do I get creative and how do I be creative? I mean, that's one way to think outside the box. But where Jen had already landed was, the moment that the other side, doesn't matter if you're the buyer or the seller, the moment you change the offer, you've changed the offer. It becomes a brand new offer, right? And that previous offer from a legal standpoint is now off the table. It doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. Yeah. 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 So unfortunately, as creative as it was, and as smart when you think about it, it was a smart way to look at it. That once you change that irrevocable and you give them that counter offer, the original offer doesn't exist. So you would have nothing to go back to because it's been altered, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that's been coming up this week too, Jen, I'm seeing it in some of the Facebook groups, is multiple offers. I'm the buyer. I submit an offer to you, Jen, and I'm one of 5, for instance. Irrevocable, I submit it this afternoon. Irrevocable is 9:00. Yet I want to renege. I want to redact or take back my offer. Can I do that?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, you cannot. Yeah. Hard no, as you said, Gary.
That's right. A hard no.
Yeah,
That's right.
hard no. Yeah, I do. I have a good story to tell you about that, though, actually. Yeah. So funny talking about our own experiences. So most people in our brokerage at least know Dylan and I sold our townhouse and bought our new house over the last 6 months or so. And when we had offers on our townhouse, we ended up with like 20 offers or something ridiculous like that. It was in the peak of all that crazy nonsense. And we went through a couple of rounds and we got down to 2 offers. And the 2 offers were very, very similar. We had, almost identical in every way. There were some things we liked about one, some we liked about the other. And there was about $1,000, I think it was, discrepancy in the price point. And, we were in a good position. The offer that we were actually going to work with called us at, I don't know what time it was, but their irrevocable was still valid. And this was after hours of negotiating with all of these offers, that they called us and said, I'm so sorry. My buyer just called me and said they don't want to go through with the purchase. They want to stay in the town that they live in. Please don't accept our offer. That was literally the phone call we got at like the last minute. 2 offers. Luckily, the other offer was an equally solid offer. There were things we liked more about it. They both had their pros and cons. So it was easy for us to say, you know what, thanks for letting us know, because we didn't want you to not show up with a deposit check tomorrow. That would be way worse. But, in different circumstance, that could have ended poorly for that buyer, right? Because the irrevocable was a valid irrevocable. We had every right to accept it as the best offer. Now, obviously, we at that point didn't want to. However, and the agent, it felt bad for the guy because he had to make that phone call. He knew what was happening, how, it was a terrible call to be making and all of that. And yeah, it was quite, I'd never had that happen before. I was just like, what the heck, but it worked out. So it was all good and we were lucky, but I could imagine that happening and that being the best offer by, $20,000 or $30,000. That buyer might not want to let that go. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as the buyer's agents, I mean, that's important for us to educate our clients to say, once this is sent, it's sent. we're on the hook at least until that irrevocable time has expired. And then from the seller side, to your point, like, if you get wind of a buyer not standing behind their offer and you're in a multiple offer situation, why even accept that? Right? Let's work with the offers that are going to do the things that they say they're going to do. Right.
Yeah, they're going to show up with a deposit the next day or that night or whatever that looks like, right? I mean, the thing about that, I guess, and this is a whole other conversation too, once the agent has notified us that they don't want to go through with it, we can prove that they didn't have intent when they submitted the offer, right? So now you get into a whole deposit debate. But that being set aside, when you're in that multiple scenario, go with the guys that want the house.
Exactly. And take this a step further too. In fact, there was a question that I saw out there, one of the forums, is if there were 5 offers and one of them wanted to retract their offer, is there now only 4 offers? Well, actually, no, there's still 5. There are still 5 from the legal standpoint, and you still have to obviously tell all 5 buyer agents that that's the amount, right? And just because one says they want it off the table doesn't mean it changes the number of offers that have been submitted.
Right. Yeah, it's still a valid offer in play until that irrevocable time passes.
You
That's
got it.
that's what you need to know, right?
You got it. Irrevocable, not able to change.
Non-revocable.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
Good
I love
stuff.
it.
Very good, Jen.
Um,
Very good. So we got lots
Yeah,
going on
that's
over the next couple of weeks before, I always think July is the official start of summer. I know that's not quite proper, but to me, that's what it
it's funny.
is.
I always think it's like June.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, very
yeah.
good. And we got lots in store over the summer. I know we'll have a few less streams, but still maybe less streams, double the amount of content. I don't know what that means, Jen, but maybe that's something that we
I
work
don't know either. We'll figure it out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so look out for the schedule coming forward over the next few weeks, and we still have a lot of great things on our education calendar for the rest of June. I know a week tomorrow is our team meeting, and we're putting together a lot of fun things for that. And Jen, we might be doing a different format, so you might want to tune in to see what the new format's going to be like.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we'll have some fun with it. And
Yeah.
I wish everybody a fantastic rest of the week. All sorts of good stuff happening in and around the market. So stay tuned for that means all great stuff around our brokers. Here, let's do this, Jen. We've had a fantastic, today we're officially halfway through the month, right? And to date, unofficially, Jen and I can share with you that we've had now 8 people join Keller Williams Realty Center. So kudos and a big shout out to those 8 people. We say unofficially because the paperwork's not all been completed yet, but we're this close, and that's always exciting times, right, Jen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so fun when you get to the point where agents are just seeing the value in what we're doing and just excited to join us, right? It makes it easier, and we get great people, and we attract people that have like-minded thought processes, and we've just got so much stuff firing right now that we have a lot to offer, and I love it. It's such an easy conversation to have. Yeah.
And we got through almost an entire hour without mentioning it once, but now we will, Jen. Where are you doing this podcast from?
I am in the new studio.
That's right. That's right. So maybe next week we do a little tour of the studio, all the fancy disco lights and everything else that we got in there.
Yeah. And I set it up myself, Gary.
That is
with
amazing.
a little help from you, but I did, so I am not a techie person. So that says a lot about how easy it is.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So very good. So, of course, thanks to Ben Tsirlin. Reach out to him for your inspection questions and opportunities for your clients as well. That's Jen Silbernagel. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody on the next show. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.